Ladies and gentlemen, if you enjoy my video, please click the like button and share the video. It is the only way the YouTube algorithms really notices me. I will be very grateful to you. Amelia's Writhing Agony. Scary story published by Scare Fiction. Read for you by Scare Fiction. Chapter 1. The Call. Jack Thompson had always taken solace in the monotony of his life. His routine as a middle-aged accountant was predictable, a comforting buffer against the unpredictable chaos he saw in the world around him. The quiet suburb where he lived was serene, with manicured lawns and friendly neighbors who waved in passing. But it was the quiet of that life that was shattered one cold autumn night. The phone rang sharply, piercing the stillness of his dimly lit living room. Jack glanced at the clock too. 17 a.m. His heart skipped a beat as he reached for the receiver. No good news ever came at this hour. "Hello," he answered, his voice groggy yet tinged with worry. "Jack." The voice on the other end was barely recognizable, a blend of fear and desperation. "It's Amelia. I need your help. Please, come quickly." Jack sat up straight, fully awake now. "Amelia, what's going on? Are you okay?" "No, I'm not okay. It's the mansion, something's wrong. Please, I need you here," she cried, her voice cracking. Memories of summers spent at the old family mansion flashed through Jack's mind, the laughter, the games, the ghost stories told by flashlight. But that was years ago. The mansion had fallen into disrepair, much like the rest of their family ties. He hadn't seen Amelia in years, their lives drifting apart with time and distance. "Amelia, calm down. What's happening? Are you in danger?" Jack asked, trying to make sense of her frantic tone. "There's no time to explain. Just come, please." And with that, the line went dead. Jack sat in stunned silence, the dial tone echoing in his ear. He felt a knot of dread tighten in his stomach. He didn't want to leave the safety of his suburban life, but Amelia's fear was palpable, and he couldn't ignore it. She was family. He grabbed his jacket and keys, his mind racing. The drive to the mansion took over an hour, and every mile closer filled him with an increasing sense of unease. The familiar landmarks of his quiet town gave way to darker, more desolate scenery. The moon cast eerie shadows on the deserted road leading to the mansion, its silver light making everything look ghostly. Finally, he arrived. The mansion loomed in the distance, its silhouette a dark blot against the night sky. Jack parked the car and stepped out, the cold night air biting through his jacket. He stood there for a moment, staring at the mansion. It looked more menacing than he remembered, its windows dark and lifeless, like hollow eyes watching him. Summoning his courage, Jack walked towards the front door. His footsteps crunched on the gravel path, echoing loudly in the oppressive silence. He reached the door and paused, taking a deep breath before knocking. The sound reverberated through the house, and he waited, every second stretching into an eternity. The door creaked open, and Jack stepped inside, his heart pounding. The air inside was cold and musty, filled with the scent of decay. "Amelia," he called out, his voice trembling slightly. There was no response, only the oppressive silence of the mansion. Jack felt a chill run down his spine. Something was definitely wrong. He took a cautious step forward, determined to find Amelia and get to the bottom of this nightmare. Chapter 2. Arrival at the mansion. Jack's heart pounded in his chest as he stepped into the foyer of the mansion. The door creaked shut behind him, sealing him in with the darkness and the unknown. His eyes slowly adjusted to the dim light, revealing an interior that matched the exterior in its neglect. The once grand staircase was now a skeletal structure of rotting wood, the banister coated in dust and cobwebs. He moved cautiously, each step stirring up a cloud of dust that glimmered in the moonlight, seeping through the cracked windows. The air was thick with the scent of mold and decay, a stark reminder of the mansion's long abandonment. As he walked, his footsteps echoed eerily, amplifying the oppressive silence that filled the house. The walls, once adorned with family portraits and elegant wallpaper, were now stripped and scarred. Faded outlines marked where pictures once hung, and the wallpaper peeled away in long, curling strips. The floor was littered with debris, shattered glass, broken furniture, and old, brittle newspapers that crumbled underfoot. Jack's unease grew with each step. He called out, "Amelia," but his voice sounded small and hollow, swallowed by the vast, empty spaces. There was no answer, only the distant sound of wind rattling through broken window panes. As he ventured further into the mansion, the signs of a struggle became more evident. In the dining room, the table was overturned, chairs scattered haphazardly around. A broken chandelier lay in pieces on the floor, its crystals sparkling like shards of ice in the dim light. Jack's eyes were drawn to a series of strange, cryptic symbols etched into the wooden table, their meaning a mystery, but their presence deeply unsettling. Fear gnawed at the edges of Jack's mind, but he pushed it aside, focusing on finding Amelia. He moved through the house methodically, room by room, each one offering a new glimpse into the chaos that had unfolded. In the study, books were ripped from their shelves, pages torn and scattered. The heavy, musty scent of old paper mingled with the sharper, metallic tang of something else, something that made Jack's stomach churn. In the living room, he found more cryptic symbols drawn on the walls and what looked like dried blood. The sight sent a shiver down his spine, but he forced himself to move closer, examining them for any clue about what had happened here. His skepticism, the part of him that wanted to believe there was a rational explanation for everything, was slowly being eroded by the mounting evidence of something far more sinister. Yet, despite his growing fear, a stronger emotion propelled him forward, the need to find Amelia and ensure her safety. Jack paused in the hallway, taking a deep breath. The next door he opened led to the basement. He hesitated, staring into the pitch-black void beyond the doorframe. A sense of foreboding gripped him, but he couldn't turn back now. Amelia was somewhere in this house, and he was determined to find her, no matter what horrors lay ahead. Summoning all his courage, Jack stepped into the darkness, each step taking him deeper into the unknown and closer to the heart of the mansion's twisted secrets. Chapter 3: Amelia's Condition. The basement steps creaked under Jack's weight, each one sounding like a small explosion in the otherwise silent mansion. He fumbled for a light switch, but found none. The air grew colder and damper as he descended, a musty smell filling his nostrils. At the bottom, the faintest glimmer of light leaked through the crack beneath a door. Jack approached it cautiously, his heart thudding in his chest. Pushing the door open, he found himself in a large, cluttered storage room. Boxes and old furniture were piled haphazardly, but his attention was immediately drawn to the far corner, where a small lamp cast a weak, flickering light over a bed. On it lay Amelia. Jack's breath caught in his throat. Amelia was barely recognizable. Her skin was an unnatural, sickly pale, and her veins stood out in stark relief, dark and twisted like the roots of a tree. She writhed in pain, her eyes half open and glazed over. Her lips moved, but the words were incoherent, a stream of mumbles and groans. "Amelia!" Jack rushed to her side, his fear spiking. He knelt beside the bed, taking her cold, trembling hand in his. "Amelia, it's me, Jack. I'm here." What happened? Amelia's eyes flickered, struggling to focus on him. "Jack," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "It's inside me. It won't let go." "Inside you? What are you talking about?" Jack's mind raced, trying to make sense of her words. He looked around the room, searching for any clue, any sign of what could be causing this. His gaze landed on a small, ancient-looking book on the bedside table. Its pages were filled with more of the cryptic symbols he'd seen upstairs. Amelia gripped his hand tighter, her nails digging into his skin. The ritual I didn't mean to, but it came. It won't leave me, Jack. Please, help me. Jack's fear deepened. This was beyond anything he could understand, beyond anything he could rationalize. I don't know how to help you, Amelia. Tell me what to do. Tears streamed down Amelia's face. The book, it has answers, but it's too strong. I can't fight it alone. Jack looked back at the book, a sense of dread washing over him. Whatever Amelia had done, whatever she had unleashed, was far more dangerous than he had imagined. But he couldn't abandon her. He had to try, no matter the cost. I'll find a way, he said, his voice firm despite the fear gnawing at him. I won't let you suffer alone. Amelia's grip relaxed, a flicker of hope in her eyes. Thank you, Jack, but be careful. It's watching. Jack nodded, determination hardening his resolve. He would delve into the book, confront whatever dark force was haunting the mansion, and save Amelia. He had no choice. She was family, and he wouldn't let her face this nightmare alone. Chapter 4. The First Encounter. Jack sat in the dim light of the basement, the ancient book open on his lap. The cryptic symbols and archaic language made his head spin, but he pressed on, desperate for any clue that could help Amelia. Each page seemed to pulse with a sinister energy, the air growing colder with every turn. As he deciphered fragments of the text, he felt a creeping sensation, as if unseen eyes were watching him. He shook it off, focusing on a passage about binding rituals and protective wards. His heart pounded with a mixture of fear and determination. He had to get this right. A sudden sound broke his concentration, the creak of a floorboard behind him. Jack's head snapped up, and he peered into the shadows. "Who's there?" he called, his voice echoing eerily. Silence. Then, from the darkness, a shadowy figure emerged. It was tall and indistinct, its form shifting and wavering as if made of smoke. Jack's breath caught in his throat. The figure moved closer, its presence oppressive and malevolent. "Stay back," Jack shouted, scrambling to his feet. He grabbed a nearby chair, wielding it like a makeshift weapon. The figure ignored his warning, continuing its slow, deliberate advance. Without warning, the shadow lunged at him. Jack swung the chair, but it passed through the figure as if it were made of air. The shadow enveloped him, cold tendrils wrapping around his body, squeezing the breath from his lungs. Panic surged through him, and he struggled desperately, his movements becoming frantic and uncoordinated. Images flashed through his mind: Amelia's twisted face, the cryptic symbols, the dark history of the mansion. His fear was suffocating, a crushing weight on his chest. He felt himself slipping, his grip on reality weakening. But then, a spark of resolve ignited within him. He couldn't let this thing defeat him. He had to fight for Amelia. Summoning all his strength, he pushed against the darkness, forcing himself to move, to breathe. The shadow hissed, a sound of pure malice, and released its grip. Jack stumbled back, gasping for air. The figure retreated, its form dissolving into the darkness. He watched, trembling, as it vanished completely. Jack sank to the floor, his body shaking with the aftershock of the encounter. The room was silent once more, but the sense of dread lingered, a tangible weight in the air. He glanced at the book, now lying closed beside him, and felt a surge of anger and determination. This was no longer just about saving Amelia. It was about confronting the darkness that had taken hold of their lives. The veil between reality and the supernatural had been torn open, and Jack was caught in the middle. But he wouldn't back down. He picked up the book, his hands still trembling, and resumed his search. The shadows might haunt him. The terror of the unknown might loom over him, but he would press on. For Amelia. For himself. For the chance to end this nightmare once and for all. Chapter 5. Uncovering the Past. Jack sat in the dimly lit study, surrounded by towering shelves lined with dusty books. The journal lay open in his lap, its pages brittle and yellowed with age. He read Amelia's frantic handwriting, each word revealing a descent into darkness he had never imagined. Amelia had been obsessed with the mansion's history, with the whispers of ghosts that echoed through its halls. She wrote of sleepless nights spent poring over old documents and faded photographs, searching for a connection to their ancestors. But her quest had led her down a treacherous path. In one entry, dated months before her call to Jack, she described a ritual, a desperate attempt to bridge the gap between the living and the dead. She had followed instructions from the grimoire, believing she could communicate with their deceased ancestors and uncover hidden truths. But the ritual had gone horribly wrong. Instead of ancestral spirits, Amelia had summoned something else, something malevolent and hungry for power. The journal entries grew increasingly frantic as she detailed the entity's influence, its whispers in the darkness, its promises of knowledge and control. Jack's hands trembled as he read, the weight of Amelia's mistakes pressing down on him. He had always seen her as strong, independent. But these words painted a different picture, a woman driven to madness by forces beyond her understanding. His resolve strengthened with each page turned. He had to find a way to break the curse, to free Amelia from the grip of this malevolent entity. It was a daunting task, one that seemed impossible in the face of such ancient darkness. But he couldn't turn back now. Amelia was counting on him, and he would not let her down. Closing the journal, Jack turned his attention to the grimoire. Its leather-bound cover felt cold and smooth beneath his fingertips. He opened it cautiously, the pages crackling as he flipped through them. Symbols and incantations filled the ancient text, each one a piece of a puzzle he was determined to solve. The hours passed in a blur as Jack delved deeper into the grimoire's secrets. He found references to protective wards and banishing rituals, each offering a glimmer of hope in the darkness that surrounded him. He took notes furiously, his mind racing with possibilities. Outside, the sun began to rise, casting a pale light through the study's dusty windows. Jack blinked, realizing how much time had passed. He had barely scratched the surface of the grimoire's knowledge, but already he felt closer to understanding the curse that plagued Amelia. As he closed the grimoire, a sense of determination settled over him. He knew what he had to do. Armed with newfound knowledge and a growing sense of purpose, he would confront the malevolent entity head-on. He would break the curse, save Amelia, and restore peace to the mansion once and for all. But as he stood, preparing to leave the study, a cold draft swept through the room. The pages of the grimoire fluttered open, revealing a passage he had not noticed before, a warning, written in ancient script, of the price that must be paid to banish such darkness. Jack's heart sank. The road ahead would not be easy, and the cost of victory might be higher than he could imagine. But he had come too far to turn back now. With a deep breath, he gathered his resolve and stepped out into the morning light, ready to face whatever horrors awaited him in the mansion's shadowed halls. Chapter 6. The Descent. Jack stood in the center of the mansion's grand hall, the grimoire open on the floor before him. Candles he had found in the study flickered around him, casting long, dancing shadows on the walls. He had spent the better part of the day preparing, drawing symbols in chalk, arranging objects as the grimoire instructed. Now, as night fell, the air grew thick with anticipation. He took a deep breath and began to chant, his voice trembling at first but growing stronger with each word. The language felt foreign on his tongue, the ancient syllables resonating in the vast empty space of the mansion. As he continued, a low hum filled the room, a vibration that seemed to come from the very walls. Suddenly, the candles flickered violently, their flames stretching toward the ceiling before going out altogether. The hall plunged into darkness, and Jack's heart raced. He forced himself to keep chanting, though the words now felt like a lifeline in a sea of blackness. Then, the mansion began to shake. The floorboards groaned, and the walls seemed to pulse with a malevolent energy. Jack felt a cold hand brush against his cheek, but when he turned, there was nothing there. Tried to focus, to keep the ritual going, but his mind was spinning. A high-pitched laugh echoed through the hall, sending chills down his spine. Shadows moved at the edges of his vision, too fast to be natural. Jack's voice wavered, but he pressed on, determined to see the ritual through. He couldn't fail now, not when he was so close. The shadows coalesced into a figure, tall and dark, its eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. Jack faltered, the words dying in his throat as the figure approached. It spoke, its voice a whisper that cut through the darkness. "You cannot banish me. I am part of this place, part of you." Jack tried to respond, but the figure reached out, and he was engulfed in a wave of icy cold. His surroundings dissolved, and he was plunged into a nightmare. He found himself back in his childhood home, the air thick with the scent of smoke and the sound of his parents arguing. The entity was manipulating his mind, dredging up his deepest fears and traumas. "No!" Jack shouted, clutching his head. "This isn't real." But the scene shifted, and he was standing at the edge of a cliff, the wind howling around him. He saw himself as a boy, teetering on the edge, the ground crumbling beneath his feet. He reached out, but the boy fell, disappearing into the abyss with a scream. The mansion's hall returned, but Jack was on his knees, shaking. The entity loomed over him, its eyes burning with cruel amusement. "You cannot fight me. You are weak." "No," Jack whispered, forcing himself to stand. "I'm not weak. I won't let you win." He grabbed the grimoire, the pages flipping wildly in the unseen wind. He found the final passage, the one he had feared. It required a sacrifice, something precious. Jack's heart ached as he realized what he had to do. He chanted the final words, pouring all his love for Amelia into the ritual. The entity shrieked, its form twisting and contorting. The mansion trembled, the walls cracking, but Jack stood firm. He felt his strength waning, but he pushed on, driven by a single thought, saving Amelia. With a final, desperate cry, he completed the ritual. The entity exploded in a burst of darkness, and Jack collapsed to the floor, the world spinning around him. The mansion fell silent, the oppressive weight lifting. Jack lay there, gasping for breath. He had done it. He had faced his deepest fears and survived. But as the darkness receded, he knew the battle was far from over. The true cost of his actions had yet to be revealed. Chapter 7. The Climax. Jack dragged himself up from the floor, every muscle protesting. The air was thick with the residue of dark energy, the mansion eerily quiet. He knew the entity wasn't gone. It was merely biding its time. He had to act fast. The grimoire lay open before him, its pages fluttering as if urging him onward. "Amelia," Jack called, his voice echoing through the desolate halls. He had to find her. Together, they might stand a chance. He stumbled through the mansion, following the faint sound of Amelia's voice. The shadows seemed to close in around him, each step heavier than the last. Finally, he reached her bedroom. Amelia lay on the bed, her skin even paler, her eyes wide and terrified. "Jack," she whispered, her voice weak. It's still here. It won't let go. We'll fight it together, Jack said, taking her hand. We can end this. Amelia nodded, a flicker of determination in her eyes. Jack glanced at the grimoire, the final passages of the ritual clear in his mind. They had to trap the entity back within its pages, but it would require both of them, their combined strength and resolve. The air grew colder, and the shadows in the room thickened. The entity began to materialize, its form towering over them, eyes glowing with malevolent glee. You cannot defeat me, it hissed. Your fear is my power. Jack stood tall, his fear transforming into defiance. We are stronger than you think, he said, tightening his grip on Amelia's hand. The entity lashed out, its shadowy tendrils whipping through the air. Jack and Amelia were thrown back, but they held on to each other, refusing to be separated. The room twisted around them, illusions of their worst fears blending with reality. Jack saw his childhood home in flames, heard the screams of his parents, felt the terror of that night. Amelia was trapped in her own nightmare, reliving the moments leading up to the summoning. But through the chaos, they found each other's gaze, a lifeline amidst the storm. Now, Jack shouted, and they began to chant the final incantation together. Their voices rose above the entity's screams, the words of the ritual binding it with ancient power. The entity shrieked, its form writhing and contorting. It lunged at them, but an invisible force repelled it, drawing it back toward the grimoire. Jack and Amelia continued, their voices unwavering, driven by a fierce determination. With a final, earth-shaking roar, the entity was pulled into the grimoire, its essence trapped within the ancient pages. The book slammed shut, the room falling silent. Jack and Amelia collapsed, gasping for breath. The mansion's oppressive atmosphere lifted, replaced by a fragile calm. Jack helped Amelia to her feet, both of them shaking but alive. They had done it. The entity was contained, and the curse was broken. Tears welled in Amelia's eyes. Thank you, Jack. I couldn't have done it without you. Jack hugged her tightly, the weight of their ordeal lifting. We did it together, he said softly. And we're free. As they made their way out of the mansion, the first light of dawn broke over the horizon, bathing the decrepit house in a golden glow. The nightmare was over, but the bond between them was stronger than ever, forged in the crucible of their shared terror and triumph. Chapter 8: Aftermath and Lingering Terror. Jack and Amelia emerged from the mansion, the morning light casting long shadows on the overgrown lawn. The oppressive weight that had hung over them was gone, but a sense of unease lingered. They walked in silence, each lost in their thoughts, the events of the past days replaying in their minds. Amelia leaned heavily on Jack, her strength sapped by the ordeal. Her skin, though still pale, had regained some color. The mansion's malevolent grip on her was broken, but the psychological scars ran deep. Are you okay? Jack asked softly, breaking the silence. Amelia nodded, though her eyes remained distant. I will be, thanks to you. They reached Jack's car, and he helped Amelia into the passenger seat. He paused for a moment, looking back at the mansion. It stood there, silent and still, as if nothing had happened. But Jack knew better. The horrors they had faced were real, and the mansion would forever be tainted by the dark entity that once resided within its walls. Jack got into the driver's seat and started the engine. The car rumbled to life, a comforting sound of normalcy amidst the chaos they had endured. As they drove away, the mansion receded into the distance, but the memories of what had transpired remained vivid. Amelia's recovery was slow but steady. She spoke little about the entity or the ritual, focusing instead on rebuilding her life. Jack stayed by her side, his presence a constant reminder of their shared ordeal. They spent hours talking, Not about the past, but about the future, trying to find solace in the mundane. Yet, Jack couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Shadows seemed to flicker at the edges of his vision, and he often woke in the night, heart pounding, convinced that something was lurking in the darkness. The entity was gone, but its lingering presence haunted his thoughts. One evening, as Jack was packing his things to leave the mansion for good, he found himself standing in the grand hall once more. Candles were gone, the chalk symbols faded, but the memory of that night was etched into his mind. He glanced at the grimoire, now safely locked away in a sturdy box. The pages were sealed, the entity contained, but he couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't truly gone. He walked out of the mansion, locking the door behind him. As he turned to leave, a cold breeze swept through the air, sending a shiver down his spine. He glanced back, half expecting to see the shadowy figure standing there, watching him. But there was nothing, only the silent, empty house. Jack got into his car and drove away, determined to start anew. Yet, as he looked in the rearview mirror, he thought he saw a flicker of movement in one of the mansion's windows. He blinked, and it was gone, but the unease remained. The mansion disappeared from view, but the experience had changed him. He knew that the line between normalcy and the supernatural was thinner than he had ever imagined. The entity was gone, but the trauma endured, a constant reminder of the horrors they had faced. And as the sun set behind him, Jack couldn't help but wonder if, one day, the darkness might return.